let's talk about security for agentic AI, Jerry. And how do we answer the question of what's the best way or what's the right way to secure an agent, using the generic term agent to mean, one of lots of different types of things. I think that's useful. I think it's to think of a taxonomy of agents. And what do we mean by that? Because there's a lot of different types and a lot of different types of technologies. There's different deployment patterns. And for each of those things, I think that we've done some research and reading on a whole bunch of different vulnerabilities. For example, different types of ways in which agentic AI can be attacked. And there's some great frameworks out there, like the OWASP one, and it looks at model poisoning and over provisioning, et cetera. I think it's useful for us to look at it a different way, which is, okay, what are the different types of agents that might exist? And for each of these things, what do we need to worry about? So let's just start easy with a really simple, like, let's say, web agent. So you might have a general purpose agent, a ChatGPT or Claude, and using those things, those are clearly operated by third parties. So you as an enterprise aren't securing the network, you aren't supporting the infrastructure, and those things generally come in a couple of different flavors, right? There's going to be a free tier, and there's going to be some sort of paid tier. So what do we need to worry about for those two parts of the first category, Jerry?
I think first you have to understand that there's really minimal data security associated with this, right? Because as they are a free tier, in most cases, the data that gets in there, you don't have control of that data. Once it's in the model, it's in the model. How you train that, how you manage that, that's something you need to consider. But when you think about the things specific to controlling that, it's identity, right? You need to have a secure understanding of identity, and you can do that based on the user and machine ID, and you can add some network controls in there if you're on enterprise or on managed devices, if you will.
Mhm.
Where that breaks down is if you're not on a managed device, if you're not on a physical network, and I'm on my phone and I open up ChatGPT on my phone, and now I'm using ChatGPT on my phone. So it's definitely something to consider from a free perspective. So managing data, there's a minimal data security that you can actually apply. You can control it more if you're, again, managed devices, managed network, and so forth. Outside of that, I think you lose a little of the control of the security. But I'm going to argue one thing, Jason: user education. Right.
Mhm.
I think it's critical that if you are, you may, even if you restrict these web agents on your managed devices, you need to educate your users on what they're doing when they're using these LLMs, what they're doing when they're doing this, and what they should or should not do. Because that's going to be your number one defense in this situation. Because again, as I said, I open up my phone, I have ChatGPT. What are you going to do when you stop on my phone when my phone is not managed?
So user education and acceptable use policy is definitely part of that. And if someone uses a personal device and they're, I don't know, taking a picture of corporate data or uploading corporate data to it, right? There's not a lot you can do about that. You can do a
That's right.
lot on a corporate managed network and a corporate managed device, and you absolutely need to. And I think you need to distinguish between the free version of these web agents, the ChatGPTs and Claudes, et cetera, and then the paid version. And really, our strong recommendation is that you push for a paid enterprise version, and that's what you're allowed to use. You do your vetting, you decide what vendor is right for your enterprise, and you block the others. And you absolutely can and must do that from your corporate network and from your corporate managed devices. You get a corporate enterprise account with, let's say, X, vendor X, and then you want to block the other ones so that you got visibility there. If you're in a regulated industry, of course, you might even have legal obligations to record and track that. So let's talk about SaaS agents now, where you've got things like business applications that they all now have some sort of AI agent in them that is doing stuff with the data and the process in that application. I mean, those are now going to provide some sort of AI capabilities for whatever specific business application that is. This is my finance application. This is my roadmap planning application. This is my engineering design application. And those clearly are ones where 100% of the time you do have enterprise accounts. And there needs to be some sort of evaluation from a legal compliance perspective, from a data security perspective. What are you getting from that vendor? And then is that a feature that you want to turn on? And what can that feature do within that data set, your proprietary, your data and your tenant?
I think that's a valid point. When you start thinking about these different types that are the agents that fall under the I would say the SaaS-based agent controls, whether it's a focused application, a broad platform, or even just office productivity, a key element behind all of that, I think there's two components that are probably most critical: identity and data. Right. Because as you start to work out how you're connecting or managing that to that SaaS application, that's 100% going to be an identity conversation. Whether they're managed or non-managed doesn't matter. But the second piece of that is the data, and how are you governing the data that's shared with those enterprise applications, and what visibility does a specific user, and more importantly, the agents in that environment, have to that data. I think it's important to understand that, control that, manage that, and apply the proper policies and controls in place to prevent any kind of exfiltration or accidental leakage or any of those kind of models.
Right. Or even a violation of your data processing agreement that you have with your customers. I've seen specific examples of this where enterprises have, of course, they have data that they manage and collect on behalf of their customers. There's a data processing agreement, terms and conditions that those customers agree to, and an AI system that's now aggregating across your customer's data set might not be allowed based on those terms and conditions. And it might be really valuable to the business, but you need to work with your legal team on, okay, what's happening here? Are we crossing some sort of line? Are we in a gray area? How do we process that? You've got to have this visibility, because otherwise your organization is going to be potentially legally at risk here. There's a couple other areas too where that have similar concerns around AI that is part of your Office suite, whether it's M365 or Google Workspace. They both have AI agents that can, and often by default, have access to everything in your tenant. And again, that can provide a ton of value. It can also significantly increase risk. We've heard, even before AI, we've heard horror stories about the SharePoint search capabilities where you could do a simple search and uncover all sorts of confidential documents. And an AI system in those environments is going to be worse because it's so easy to misconfigure. And by default, they get access to everything. So there's definitely some risk there. And again, it comes down to what sort of controls do you have in place. User education is part of it, but you absolutely, as an administrator, have control and have to put some parameters and guardrails around this that get enforced by the platform.
Yeah, I think it goes back to data governance and data categorization and management of the data associated with that. Because as you said, those agents usually get full access to those tenants, which means they open up those environments to the data. So really getting a handle on that and driving that from a policy perspective, I think is huge.
Exactly. All right, and then let's very quickly talk about a third category, which is really custom agents. And let's take a relatively simple one, which is something that's running on your local device. Let's talk about that, Jerry, an open cloud type of thing.
So yeah, a custom agent that has access to multiple systems or management systems, right? I think it's a matter of understanding and driving access to, or providing access to, the systems you want it to actually manage, and then ultimately providing the guardrails. You and I have probably had some conversations or disagreements around what are guardrails and do guardrails work for agents, but providing guardrails to determine what can those agents or those custom agents do in your environment. I think those guardrails are policies that's defined within the confine of the agent, as well as potential network confines, because you don't want it necessarily to go all over the place. So I think well-defined guardrails to keep things like from what happened to me, where I lost everything and had to rebuild everything from scratch because an agent had no guardrails, and I simply said go, and it went, and then I walked away and I came back and nothing was left. So you have to be careful of those types of things.
Yes, and I think that's a trap that users can fall into for sure. So it's number one, it's important to have some resilience in your environment around, hey, let's make sure that everything that users save is not just on their local machine, but it gets replicated to a cloud environment, it gets backed up so you can recover. And that an agent on a user device can't delete everything in the shared environment for other users. At the same time, you do want to encourage users to deploy some of this new technology, but it's got to have, I have to use the word guardrails, right? Constraints around it. Then you get to other types of agents that get deployed in your enterprise by presumably engineers, developers, application owners, et cetera. And those are things where you do, of course, have a lot more control in your environment. I think the challenge is that in many cases, the people deploying that are doing so outside of your governance processes because maybe you don't have a lot of formality around it, or it's just so new. And chances are those agents are going to be overprivileged or be configured to do whatever needs to be done. So it's going to be very difficult to look at something as an observer, as an operations team, and determine, okay, this system over here is making all of these calls. Is this okay? Is this expected, or is this anomalous or malicious? So it's a matter of absolutely getting ahead of this and developing a partnership with those stakeholders in your organization and setting up these golden paths or guardrails, constraints, rules, acceptable use that says, okay, we, the security team, want to help you. We want to securely enable the use of this new, exciting and really valuable technology. You can't just go deploy stuff and then, when things break, then we all have a problem. Let's follow these specific patterns where we're making sure that everyone understands this from an operations perspective. We have properly things backed up. We have proper authentication, et cetera. So those, I think, are the things that you have to worry about with that type of model. All right, that I think is a real quick pass through the taxonomy. We got a lot more. We could talk about this for an hour or a day. If you want to meet with us, we're happy to do so. But for now, I think we're going to sign off. Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks, Jason. It's good talking.